How you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Lamed Beis, Daf 32, the heart of Masechta BavaMetzia. I think that this is a good daf. I think it's an interesting daf. Oh, it's a gewaltige daf. It's a geschmack daf. So is tomorrow's. Today, Lemaise is Purim. It's Purim everywhere. Today is Purim. Tomorrow Shushan Purim. Of course, I celebrate Shushan Purim. Today I have to make a costume. I'll tell you what my costume is going to be. It keeps on changing, right? We've talked about spaghetti. We've talked about power washers. Talked about BavaMetzia. So I think my costume is going to be BavaMetzia. I have to see what's open today. I hope that all the stores that I need are open today. Otherwise, I won't have a costume. Well, okay, if I don't have a costume, At least I have an excuse, right? The stores weren't open. No, but hopefully they're open. Hopefully what I need I'll find. I'm going to be BavaMetzia. That's my costume, BavaMetzia. If I can find all my supplies, so I'll dress up as BavaMetzia. It's going to be great. All right, but I have to do that today. So that's why I got to record now. And then after I record, I got to start collecting things for a costume. I went down to the basement and found all my art supplies. Once a year, Purim time. That's when you got to find all, see what you got, collect inventory. I have some good stuff down there. I even found my master's diploma. It's good to know where that is, I guess. It's a little bit bent. But all right, as long as I have it. All right. Yeah, I have some good art supplies. Let's go weiter. Says the Mishnah on Daf Lamed Beis Amud Aleph, in the heart of BavaMetzia. Motza berefes. So says the Mishnah about 10 lines in. Motza mitzah berefes. Okay, so if you find an animal in a barn, ein chayav ba, you don't have to do hashavas aveda. You don't have to return it to its owner. Just leave it in the barn. Rishus harabim chayav ba. If you find the animal in rishus harabim, so then you have to return it to. You have to do hashavas aveda. You have to return it to its owner. V'im haisa beveis akvochis. If he is a kohen and the lost object is in a cemetery, lo yitama lo, he shall not become tameh in order to retrieve it. He's a kohen. The kohen's not allowed to become tameh meis. Im omar lo aviv hitame, and if his father says to him, right, the kohen, if his father says to him, go make yourself tameh in order to return the lost object, or sha'omar al tachzir, or alternatively, in a different situation, we're not talking about a beis hakvaros. Just his father says to him, look, I don't want you to do the mitzvah of hashavas aveda in general, right? So you find like a lost object on the street, and he says, don't return it. Lo yishmalo, do not listen to your father. In that case, parak v'to'an, afil arba v'chmisha paimim. Oh wait, one second. What did I say? Wait, one second. Break. Stop. I said today's daf was a very geschmack daf, right? Did I say why it's such a geschmack daf? It's the whole sugi of Tsar Bar Lechaim. It's very interesting. Is it an instrument of Oraisa or Midorabanon? I think it's a very interesting subject. So now, back to our Mishnah. Parak v'to'an afilu arba v'chmisha paimim. So there's a mitzvah that if you see that your friend's, what does the pasuk say? Your friend's donkey is lying down under its load, it's overloaded, so you have to help your friend unload it. So you have to help your friend unload it. So that's prika. And te'ina would be fakert. If you see that your friend is trying to load up his donkey, help him out, help him load it up. Okay, so parak v'to'an, if you keep on taking it off the donkey, putting it back on, and then I guess having to take it off again and having to put it back on again. Even if you have to do this 4 or 5 times, still do it 4 or 5 times. Chayiv. Shenemar, the Bible says, Azov Tazov. Okay, you shall surely help him out. Is that what Azov means, to help him out? Maybe. I don't know. Azov is like to leave. I don't know. But I think here it essentially means help him out, right? Help him put the stuff on the thing. Okay, we learned out the other day though that Azov, Filumei Apaimim and Tazov, we said even if he's not going to help you out, because this is going to be Shayach here in a second. Okay, let's go by there for a second. The Pasuk says, Azov Tazov, Halach v'yoshav lo. Now, however, if the owner of the donkey says, he just sits down next to the, he sits down on the ground, he finds a pina colada and he drinks it, and he says, V'omar, and he says, Ho v'alecho mitzvah, and he says to the passerby, well, since you have a mitzvah to unload my donkey, if you want to unload it, it's your mitzvah, I'm just going to sit here and drink this pina colada. Potter. Well, in that case, the passerby does not need to help out. Shenemar imo. It says azov tazov imo. You have to help him, right? If the owner of the donkey is saying, "Look, it's your mitzvah. I'm just going to sit down and drink a pina colada," so then you don't have to help him out. Im hoya zakin ochol lechayev. However, if the reason why the owner of the donkey was not helping out and was not unloading the things is because he was old or because he was sick, well, in that case, the passerby would have to help unload it, even though the owner is not participating. And this is what I was saying a minute ago, right? We learned the other day, I think it was Rava, who said, from Azov, we learn out even if it's 100 times. So like when we say even 4 or 5 times, right, from Azov, and then Azov Tazov, you shall surely assist him, means that even if he's not helping out because he's older, because he's sick, still you need to help out. But if he says, like, forget it, it's your mitzvah, I'm just going to sit down and drink this pina colada over here, so then you don't need to help out in that case. Mitzvah minatora lifrok avalo liton. It's a mitzvah midaoraisa to unload the animal that is struggling. It is not a mitzvah to load it up. Now you might be asking, what do you mean it's not a mitzvah to load it up? Right? We have Hakum Sokim, right? It says Azov Tazov is Prika, Hakum Sokim is Te'ina. So what do you mean there's no mitzvah? So we're going to get to that. Reb Shimon Omer says, Reb Shimon Af Liton. Reb Shimon says, Oichit, to load the animal, to load up the animal is Oichit, mitzvah d'oraisa, okay. Rabbi Yosef Aglili Omer says, Rabbi Yosef Aglili, Im oyo olav yoser al masao ein zokuk lo para. Rabbi Yosef Aglili says, look, if the donkey can handle 100 pounds of stuff and he put on 150 pounds of it, you have no obligation to help him out in that case. Shenemar, as opposed to says, tachas masao, that the donkey is struggling under its burden, masoi sheyachul la'amod bo, a burden that is appropriate for it. If the owner put an inappropriate burden on the animal, you are no longer obligated to help out. Amar Rove, says the Gemara, says Rove, refes she'amu eina maseh ve'eina mishameres. Okay, the barn that we're talking about is not a barn that would kind of force the animal out of there. Yeah, I'm not super clear on what that means. I think potentially maybe what it means is, like, let's say you have a barn, maybe it doesn't have any food in it, so like it's pretty obvious that the animal is not going to linger there for long because, like, it's there's no food there, or for whatever other reason, I guess it needs to get out of there. Well, then yeah, you're going to have to return. Then you would have to return the animal because, like, it's going to get lost. So when we talk about that, you don't need to return. You can leave the animal there and go on your merry way. Is when it's a barn that is not going to force it out. Ve'ena mishameres, and it's also not. We're not talking about a barn that is locked. We're not talking about a barn that is locked, because if it was locked, then it would be obvious that you would not need to return it, which we'll get to in a second. So it's talking about if you pass by a barn and there's an animal in the barn and there's food in the barn and the animal has everything that it needs, okay, you can just leave it there, you don't have to return it to its owner. But if, like, there's no food there and it's obviously going to leave, or right, so then you would have to return it. And yeah, if it was a barn that was locked and the animal can't get out, well, then obviously you don't need to return it, you can leave it there. Eina maseh, how do we know that it's talking about a barn? How do we know it is not talking about a barn that it would be forced to leave from, or that it is, alternatively, that it is talking about a barn where it has everything that it needs, not one where it would be forced to leave? And the fact that it says that you don't need to return the animal to its owner, because if it was going to be forced to leave, then you would have to return the animal to its owner. Ve'ena mishameres, and when we say that it is not guarding, that's because it's obvious that where it's not locked, where it's not guarded. From the fact that the Mishnah had to tell us that there's no chiyuv of Hashavas Aveda. So clearly, it is talking about a barn that is not locked, because if it was locked, then it would be obvious that you would not have to do Hashavas Aveda. The Isal Kadaitech Mishameres, because if it enters your mind that the Mishnah is talking about a barn that was locked, well, Hashta, we learned the other day, Mashkach lo Avroi, we learned yesterday, 2 days ago, that if you find a, what was it, yesterday? I think yesterday. That if you find a lost object outside of a locked area, you can return it to the locked area. And that was the chiddush that the owner doesn't necessarily need to know about it. But right, as long as it's his area and it's locked, so you can return it there. Okay, where am I? If you find a lost, if you find this animal outside of the locked area, you would dafka bring it into the locked area. I mean, it goes without saying that if you find the animal inside a locked barn, then you can just leave it there. That's obvious. So rather it's talking about where it is not locked. So it sounds like we're talking about a barn where the animal could get out if it wanted to, but it also has everything that it needs in there. So therefore, you don't have to assume that it's going to get out, and you can leave it and you can continue going on your merry way. Motza birefes eino chayav. Okay, if you find so we said if you find this animal in a barn, you don't have to return it to its owner, you can leave it there. Amar Bitzchok, vehu she'omedes toch letchum, that is talking about a barn that is within the tchum of the city. Now, obviously, of course, we know the tchum from Shabbos, from Eruvin, but this is just talking about the same tchum, but not talking about Eruvin, but it's if it's within 2,000 amas of the city, so yeah, okay, the animal's in a barn within 2,000 amas of the city, leave it. Michlal, the B'Rishus Harabim, that when we're saying that if you find the animal in B'Rishus Harabim, you do have to return it, that's Va'afilu B'socha Tchum Nami Chayev. That's even though the B'Rishus Harabim was within the Tchum of the city, still you have to return the animal if you find it in the B'Rishus Harabim. Ikedamasni Lo Aseifa, to those who teach the Tchum about the Seifa B'Rishus Harabim Chayev Ba, that when the Mishnah says that if you find the animal in Rishus Harabim, so you would have to return it. And Rabbi Yitzchak says that that's davka when the Rishus Harabim is outside of the tchum. That's when you have to return it. Which therefore implies that when it's the barn, even though it's outside of the tchum, still you can leave the animal there and continue on your merry way. So well, that's interesting. Wow. I just instinctually said, even though it doesn't actually say v'chule, but then there's a letter that adds v'chule. That's interesting. Okay. So, Tanu Rabbanon. Okay, so we had said that if you have a coin, and the lost object is in a Beis HaKvaris. Now, of course, a coin can't go into a Beis HaKvaris, so we said, don't return it. Okay. Tanu Rabbanon. And then we had said that, and even if his father says, go into the Beis HaKvaris, right? What was there? So if he said, where am I? Right. If his father had said, look, I want you to go into the Beis HaKvaris and return the lost object, he does not listen to his father. So Tanu Rabbanan Minayin, how do we know? Shem Amrlo Aviv Itame, that if his father says to him, go into the Beis HaKvaris and become Tameh, even though he's a Kohen, or just in general, if he finds Epis and his father says, don't return it, Shelo Yishmalo, that you should not listen to your father in that case. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, Ish Imo ve'aviv tirou, okay, one must fear his mother and father. But still, you must guard my Shabbos, for I am Hashem, your God. Kulchem chayovin bichvodi, all of you are chayav in my honor, including your father. And therefore, if your father tells you to be mechal Shabbos, do not listen. And here also, if your father tells you to become tmei meis as a kohen in order to return a lost object, do not listen. So time of the cause of Rachmona es shabsosai tishmoru. So 1 second, Fekti Gemara. The reason why you should not listen to your father is because the pasuk says es shabsosai tishmoru, and therefore you have to listen to. You can't. If your father tells you to violate the mitzvah, then you don't listen to him. But if we wouldn't specifically have es shabsosai tishmoru, hava amina, I would think that I should listen to, right, that this Kohen should listen to his father. That it's because of this pasuk that we learn that the Kohen's son should not listen to his father. But if we didn't have this pasuk, then I would think that he should listen to his father and become tamei in order to receive a lost to retrieve a lost object. Why would I have thought that? Hay essay, by those decisive essay, listening to your father, kibbut avim is a mitzvah essay, but come on. Where am I? Okay. So forget about the Kohen becoming tummy one. I think it would be better talking about the Ashavas Aveda one, right? So meaning, if your father says, do not be Ashavas Aveda, right? Meaning, right, you find a lost object, you say, hey, I'm going to return that. Your father says, don't return it. So we're saying, well, don't listen to your father, and instead you should return it. So we're saying, how do we know not to listen to your father in that case, and that you should return it? Because it says, V'shabsosai tishmoru, that, V'ani Hashem Elokechem, that you have to listen to me, don't listen to your father if he contradicts me. But if we wouldn't have this pasuk, I would know it anyways. Because hay esei v'lo saisiv esei, that kibbut avim is mitzvah esei, but ashavas aveda is both a esei and a lo saisei, right? Hashev teshivim, and it says, where am I? And lo sucha l'sali. So it's an essay and a lo saisei. V'lo osi essay, and the mitzvah's essay of kibbut avim would not be able, v'dochias lo saisei essay would not be able to override the essay and the lo saisei of Hashavas Aveda. So I don't understand why we need this pasuk. Anyways, I would know because of essay lo daisi lo dochi lo saisei essay. So I would already know that he would have to do Hashavas Aveda and not listen and not do kibbut avim. Itzrich. No, I still need the pasuk as of V'shabsosai tishmoru, because Haggadatich Amina, I may have thought to say Hol v'hukosh kibbut avim lichvod shamakom. Well, since kibbut avim is compared to, right, just like, right, since honoring one's father and mother is compared to honoring God, Shneimar Kan, as it says by kibbut avim, kabed es avicha v'esimecha, and it says by God, v'neimar lahalon, kabed es Hashem mehonecha. So it says kibbut both by kibbut avim and by kibbut of God. Hilkach litzayis lei. So I might think that just like we say that Shnechem, Kulchem Chayvim Bechvodi, that all of you are commanded, everyone is commanded in my honor, and my honor is compared to your parents' honor. So I might think that even if your father says, do not return the lost object, you should listen to your father, because listening to your father is like listening to God. Honoring your father is like honoring God, and therefore listen to your father. Kamash Malon Tilo Lishmalei. Therefore we say no. That we say, Ashabsosai Tishmo Ani Hashem Elokechem, that if your father is telling you to be over on a mitzvah, so then do not listen to him, because you have to honor me in doing the mitzvahs. And therefore, and therefore, if your father says don't do kibbut avim, don't do Hashavas Aveda, ignore him and do Hashavas Aveda. Okay, so now the Mishnah had said something very peculiar. Mitzvah minater lifrok avalo l't'om. That there's a mitzvah de'oraisa to unload a donkey. There is no, seemingly it's saying there is no mitzvah de'oraisa to load up a donkey, to assist somebody in loading up a donkey. My avalo l't'om. What does it mean that there's no mitzvah of te'ina, of loading up a donkey? Ilema avalo l't'on klal. That there's no mitzvah at all to load up a donkey. Maishna prika tichsiv azov tazov imo. I don't understand. Prika, the mitzvah says Azav Tazavimo. Te'ina also, the pasuk says, Hakim Sakim Imo. So I don't know, why would one be Doraisa and one wouldn't? I mean, both, right? Prika is unloading an animal, Te'ina is loading up an animal. Both of them are in the Torah. So why are we saying that only Prika is Doraisa, Te'ina isn't? There's a pasuk by Te'ina Oichit. Elo, mitzvah min haTeireh lifrok bichinam, that there's a mitzvah midoraisa, you have to help unload the animal even for free. Velo liton bichinam, but you have a mitzvah to load up the animal, but you're also, you can also, you're entitled to be paid to load up the animal, right? Velo liton bichinam ella bisachar. Reb Shimon Omer af liton bichinam, and Reb Shimon disagrees and says no. Also, loading up the animal you have to do for free as well. Tanina la Tanu Rabbanon, and our Mishnah is basically confirming that, essentially saying the same thing that we learned in a brisa, right? Backing up that which we learned in a brisa. The Tanu Rabbanon Prika bechinam te'ina b'socher. According to Tanakama, you must unload the animal for free, but to load up the animal, you're entitled to be paid. Reb Shimon Omer zovazo bichinam, whereas Reb Shimon says that both activities must be done for free. My tamau de rabbanon. How come the rabbis make a distinction between prika and te'ina? How come the rabbis make a distinction between unloading, which must be done for free, and loading, which you can be paid for? Because if it's like Reb Shimon, that both of them are the same, both of them are for free. We saw this the other day, I think yesterday, and I struggled a little bit to figure out the Kal V'chomer. Here it spells it out for us better. Well, lichtov rachmane te'ina, well then the pasuk should only write loading up the animal, v'lo bai prika, right? If there's no distinction at all between loading and unloading, both are done for free, so then all I really need to write is loading. Don't write unloading, v'ana amina, and I'll know on my own. I'll say, uma te'ina delays ba tzar bar lechayim v'leka chesun kis, that if when it comes to loading up an animal, where if I refrain from helping load the animal, I won't be contributing to tzar bar lechayim of the animal, I won't be causing any financial loss to the owner of the animal, chayiv, and yet I still must help. So prika, unloading an animal that is lying under its burden, the izba tzar bar lechayim, that the animal is in distress, and if I do not help out, the animal will continue to be in distress, and I would be contributing to its pain. V'chesun kis, and also the animal is going to be damaged, which will be a financial loss to the owner. Lo kol shekain, certainly I should have to help out. If by loading the animal, which has none of these things, right? If I just ignore it and turn a blind eye and keep on going, the animal will not be in pain, the owner will not lose any money, and yet I need to stop what I'm doing and help. Well then certainly, when it comes to unloading a struggling animal, where if I turn a blind eye, I will be leaving an animal in pain, I will be contributing to financial loss of the owner, certainly I should have to help out. So ela lemay ilchasa kos ve'rachmana. So why does the Torah write both of them, even though theoretically I could argue that it should only have to write te'ina? So lo ma'loch, to say that there's a difference between the two. Prika bichinam, that unloading must be done for free, but te'ina b'sachar, loading up, you are entitled to be paid for. Reb Shimon, my taima, and so now according to Reb Shimon though, who says that both activities must be done for free, well then how come we need both to be written? As we had said, just write te'ina and I'll know prika. So mishum delo misai mekroi, because the psukim are not clear. That's why we need both. If they would, it's not clear that azov tazov is prika and that hakum sakim is te'ina. And if we would only have one of them, we would say, well, I don't know, is it prika, is it te'ina? Well, maybe it's talking about prika and te'ina is not bichlal a mitzvah. So therefore, we need both of them to say, okay, well, here are these two activities. I'm not sure which one's Prika, which one's Tina, but clearly you got to do both because there are two psukim. So one must be Prika, one must be Tina. Both of them are mitzvahs. V'ra'abonon, amaylo mesaime, kroi. The rabbis say, "What? I don't agree with that." The rabbis say, "We don't agree with that." What do you mean that the psukim are not clear? What's not clear? Hocha ksiv rovetz tachas maso. The first pasuk, right, by the pasuk of Prika, it says, if you find an animal that is lying under its burden, what do you think it's talking about? Clearly, it's talking about you have to unload it. That's Prika, obviously. Hosam ksiv noflim baderech. And by the other pasuk, it says that you have the animal and its load are fallen on the floor. So diramu inu v'tu'unayu be'orcho mashma, that both the animal and the load are lying on the floor, and you need to load it up onto the animal. That's clearly te'ina. So the rabbi said, what do you mean it's not clear? It's very clear. The first pasuk is talking about Prika. The second pasuk is talking about te'ina. Reb Shimon noflim baderech inu v'ti'unayu ilovayu mashma. Whereas Reb Shimon said, look, I can argue that both psukim are talking about Prika, and that when it says noflim baderech, it means that the animal has fallen on the way, but the load is still on its back. Right? You could say that when the pasuk says Losir eschomer achicha o shor noflim baderech, that don't find your friend's donkey or ox fallen on the ground. It means that the donkey or the ox has fallen, but it still has its load on its back, and that could be talking about Prika, that you have to help unload it in order to, so to lighten the load on the animal. So it's not clear that, right, that one of them is Prika and one of them is Te'ina. Therefore, I need, if you'd only have one of them, I would say it's talking about Prika. I wouldn't know about Te'ina, and therefore we need both of them to say that both are mitzvahs. Okay, fine. Now we get to the sugya of Tsar Ba'alei Chaim. Is Tsar Ba'alei Chaim midoraisa or midirabbanan? Right? That to ensure that an animal is not experiencing pain, duress, is that a mitzvah deoraisa or a mitzvah dirabbanan? Amar Rava says, Rave midivrei shneim nilmad Tsar Ba'alei Chaim deoraisa. So let us learn that both from Reb Shimon and from the Tanakama, Tsar Ba'alei Chaim is midoraisa, because both Reb Shimon and the Tanakama understand the Kal Vachomer the same, right, the same way, right? Both assume that, even according to Reb Shimon, right, who says that the psukim are not clear, he does agree though that if the psukim were clear, and if we did have a pasuk that clearly said, I am talking about te'ina, about loading up an animal, well then, yeah, we wouldn't need to have a pasuk for Prika, because I would make a Kal Vachomer. I would say, well, if by loading up the animal where there's no Tsar Ba'alei Chaim, I have to do it, well then certainly by unloading an animal where there is Tsar Ba'alei Chaim, I would also have to do it, and I would only need one pasuk, right? So even Reb Shimon, right? So both Reb Shimon and the Tanakama agree about this Kal Vachomer, that you would be able to make the argument that if you need to load the animal, certainly you need to unload the animal when there is Tsar Ba'alei Chaim. So midivrei shneim nilmad, from both the Tanakama and from Reb Shimon, let us learn Tsar Ba'alei Chaim deoraisa, that Tsar Ba'alei Chaim is a mitzvah midoraisa. Va'afilu Reb Shimon, and even Reb Shimon, and even Reb Shimon, who requires both psukim, lo ka'omer elo mishum de lo masai mekroi. He only says that you need both psukim because it's not clear which pasuk is which. That's all. Aval masai mekroi. But if it would be explicit which is the pasuk that's talking about te'ina, well then darshinon Kal Vachomer. Well then we should only have one pasuk, the pasuk of te'ina, and say the Kal Vachomer mishum mai Lav mishum Tsar Ba'alei Chaim darshinon, and say that all you need is te'ina, is loading up the animal, and say that if by loading up the animal where there's no tsar ba'alei chayim, I still need to contribute. So certainly unloading the animal where the animal is in pain, certainly then I should need to contribute, which means that clearly tsar ba'alei chayim is a thing that we need to be concerned about. Midoraisa. So answer to Gemara, Dilma Mishum Diika Chesron Kis. To which the Gemara says, wait, but there's another factor here, which is loss of money. Maybe we could say Tsar Ba'alei Chayim is not Midoraisa. The reason why all it needs to say is Te'ina, and I would know Prika, is because if by Te'ina, loading up the animal, where there's no financial loss, by me turning a blind eye, I would not be contributing to any financial loss to the owner, and still I need to contribute. So certainly where the animal is struggling and has fallen under its load, where the animal is going to be damaged and cause financial loss to the owner, certainly I need to help out, right? So if by Te'ina, where there's no financial loss, I need to help out. Certainly by Prika, where there is financial loss, I would have to help out. So maybe the Kavachomer is not about Tsar Ba'alei Chayim, maybe the Kavachomer is about financial loss. If by loading up the animal, where if I turned a blind eye, I would not be contributing to any financial loss to the owner, chayav, and yet I still need to contribute. Prika, unloading a struggling animal, the izba chesron kis, where by turning a blind eye, I would be, right, the animal would be getting damaged and I would be contributing to a loss of money to the owner, lo kol sheken, certainly I would need to contribute. To which the Gemara says, not necessarily. The Chesron Kis route is not bulletproof because, it's not foolproof because, Ute'ina ein ba Chesron Kis, is that really true? That loading up the animal, that by turning a blind eye to loading up the animal, I would not be contributing to any financial loss? That's not necessarily true. Milo askina de adachi v'achi batul mishuke? Could this not be talking about a scenario where the owner is on his way to the market in order to sell his wares, and that if he can't get to the market on time, he's going to miss the window, and he's not going to be able to make, and he's going to lose money, and therefore by turning a blind eye and not helping him get back on track and get back on the way to the market, I will be contributing to financial loss. Inami, alternatively, asuganove vishakle komadi ikabayde. Alternatively, you could say, if you turn a blind eye, thieves can come and steal his stuff that's just lying there that you did not help load. So it's unclear that it's not objectively true that turning a blind eye to loading up the animal has no financial loss associated with it. There could be financial loss associated with it too. Therefore, that Kavachomer is not foolproof. However, the Kal V'chomer by Tsar Ba'alei Chayim is a stronger Kal V'chomer to say that if by loading the animal where there's no Tsar Ba'alei Chayim by turning a blind eye, I still have to help out, certainly then by unloading an animal where there is Tsar Ba'alei Chayim by turning a blind eye, you would certainly need to contribute, and therefore you would certainly need to help out. And so we see that Tsar Ba'alei Chayim is Mide'oi Raisa. Teda, you should also know that Tsar Ba'alei Chayim De'oi Raisa, that Tsar Ba'alei Chayim is Mide'oi Raisa, the Katoni Seifa. That the Mishnah then continues and says, Rabbi Yossi Aglili, Omer says Rabbi Yossi Aglili, Im hoya olav yoser al masa'o ein zokuk lo. Rabbi Yossi Aglili says that if the donkey was carrying more than it can handle, right? If it can handle 100 pounds and it was carrying 150 pounds, well then you don't have any obligation to help out. Shneimar, the Apostle says, Tachas masa'o sheyachol la'amud bo, that you only have to help out when you have an animal that is struggling under its burden, a burden that it is able to handle. So the assumption for now is everybody agrees about the explanation of that pasuk, right? How to learn that pasuk. The Tanakama, Reb Shimon, Rabbi Yossi Aglili, everybody agrees that what that pasuk is saying is that you only the mitzvah of prika is only when the animal is loaded up with a burden that it can handle. If it's too much, then you don't have to help out in terms of the mitzvah of prika. Now, we're saying that Rabbi Yossi Aglili says that ein zakuk lo. Therefore, you would not need to help him unload it in that case. Lav Michlal, does that not imply that nonetheless the Tanakama Sovar Zokuk Lo, does that not imply that both the Tanakama, which Rashi points out is meaning the Tanakama of Rabbi Yossi Aglili, i.e. whoever came before Rabbi Yossi Aglili, i.e. The Rabbanan and Reb Shimon, say that even though the pasuk is saying specifically an amount that it can handle, and Rabbi Yossi Aglili says therefore you would not need to help him unload, nonetheless, right, the Reb Shimon and the Rabbanan would argue with Rabbi Yossi Aglili and say even so you still need to help him unload it. Why would you have to help him unload it even though the pasuk is saying that technically you don't? My time alav mishum de tzar ba'alechaim de'oraisa? Is it not because tzar ba'alechaim is de'oraisa? And that's why even though the pasuk says that it's specifically you only have the chiyuv of prika when it's an amount that it can handle, but even so, even if it's more, nonetheless, and there's still a separate thing, a separate reason why you would have to unload it is because tzar ba'alechaim, according to the Rabbanan and Reb Shimon. To which the Gemara says, maybe that's not true. Maybe they don't all agree about how to understand Masa'o. Right? Maybe, yes, Rabbi Yossi Aglili says that Masa'o means an amount that it can handle, but if it can't handle, so then you don't have an obligation. But maybe the Rabbanan and Reb Shimon don't learn the pasuk that way. Maybe that is taka the machlokas, that Rabbi Yossi Aglili learns that it only means what it means, that you're only chayiv if it has something that it is meant to handle. Rabbi Yossi Aglili says that masao means an amount that it can handle. If it's more than it can handle, you don't have an obligation. Rabbanan Savre, whereas the Rabbanan and Reb Shimon hold lo dashinon tachas masao, that we don't learn out tachas masao that it means only if it's an amount that it can handle. Rather, they say no, any burden, right? If you see an animal that's struggling under a burden, any burden, you have to help out. And that is why, and that's why they say they have to help out, but not necessarily because of tzar ba'alechaim, but because the pasuk says if you see an animal struggling under a burden, you have to help. So therefore, you have to help. Now we turn it the other way. So now the Gemara suggests that maybe we can start arguing that actually tzar ba'alechaim is not mideoraisa. The katani reisha, because after all, the Mishnah had also said halach v'yoshav lo v'amlo hoyo v'alecho mitzvah lifrok prok potter, that if the owner of the donkey if the owner of the donkey that is, struggling and collapsing under its burden says, you know what? I'm going to sit down and drink a pina colada. You have a mitzvah to unload my donkey. You go do it. So we say that the passerby does not need to help out if the owner is going to sit down and drink pina colada. He doesn't have to do it on his own. Shenemar imo, it says imo, you have to do it with him. You can't just sit down and say, you do it. But what about tzar ba'alechaim? If you say that tzar ba'alechaim is midoraisa, so why is the passerby able to say, okay, well, he's not contributing, I'm just leaving? What about the pain of the animal? Mali ise lemori baide, mali kilese lemori baide. Who cares if the owner is contributing is helping out or not? You have a mitzvah to prevent tzar ba'alechaim. So therefore, from the fact that we say that if the owner is not helping out, then you have no obligation, it must be that, what about the tzar ba'alechaim? It's not midoraisa. So to which the Gemara says, la'olam tzar ba'alechaim de'oraisa. No, I'll say that really tzar ba'alechaim is de'oraisa. So then what does it mean that if the owner doesn't contribute, then I can just keep going? What about tzar ba'alechaim? Misavrat potter legamre? Do you think that when it says that if the owner sits down to drink pina colada, you're completely potter? That you can just turn a blind eye and keep on moving and leave the animal in pain? Dilma potter bichinam v'chayev b'socher. No, maybe it just means that, look, if the owner is going to sit down and drink pina colada, well, you no longer have an obligation to work for free and to unload it for free. If he's going to help out, so yeah, you do it together and you contribute for free. But if he's going to sit down and drink pina colada, yeah, of course you still have an obligation to unload the animal because of tzar ba'alechaim, but you're entitled to be paid. This is what the pasuk is saying. If the owner of the animal, of the donkey, is going to help you and assist you, and you'll do it together to unload the animal, avad gabe bechinam, so then do it for free. And if the owner is going to drink pina colada, avad gabe, so yeah, of course you still need to unload the animal. because of Tzar Ba'alei Chaim, but B'Socher. You're entitled to get paid for your efforts. With Olam Tzar Ba'alei Chaim D'Oraisa, and Tzar Ba'alei Chaim is D'Oraisa, and you cannot simply turn a blind eye. But if the owner is not going to help, so then you're entitled to demand payment. Now says the Gemara, let's say that the following brisa supports Rave, who says that Tzar Ba'alei Chaim is mi de'oraisa. Behemas oved kichovim mitapel ba ki behemas Yisrael. That the animal of an oved kichovim you must help unload just like the animal of a yid. Now, if you say Tzar Ba'alei Chaim is midoraisa, I understand. There's no right. It doesn't matter who owns the animal. If the animal is in pain, you have an obligation to prevent that. That is why, regardless of who owns the animal, you have an obligation to alleviate Tzar Ba'alei Chaim, and therefore you must help out no matter who owns the animal. But if you say that Tzar Ba'alei Chaim is midrabanan, well then, if the owner of the animal is not a yid, so then why do you have to help him out? Why do you have an obligation to help him out? So also mishum eva, you have an obligation to help him out because of eva, so that there shouldn't be any friction between the communities, that nobody should be upset with you. So this is not a proof that Tzar Ba'alei Chaim is midoraisa. So you could say Tzar Ba'alei Chaim is midorabanan. Well, then why do you have to help out by Novik Kechavim? To keep the peace, right? So that there shouldn't be animosity between the non-Yidden communities and the Yidden communities. Hachinam Mistav this take makes sense. The Katoni im what's this? Oh, okay, Beseder. Oh, okay, that's good. Yeah, there's a note that adds Seifa. I think I like it better with Seifa. Hachinam Mistav the Katoni Seifa. And Taka makes sense. Taka makes sense because the continuation then says, Im oisa te'una yayin osir. Now, if, however, the animal was laden with wine, with yayin osir, with forbidden wines, right? Because mele will be yain nesech, ein zakuk la, then you don't need to help out because you can explain, right, in terms of, because if we're saying that it's about Ava, about animosity, you can explain, look, I'm forbidden, I can't, I'm sorry, but I'm forbidden from helping out in this particular case. And okay, Seder. So Yomid Bishloma Lav De'iraisa, so I understand if you say that Tzar Ba'alei Chaim is not Mide'oraisa, well that is why, if we're talking about Yei Nesech, you could say, look, I can't help you. What about Tzar Ba'alei Chaim? It's not Mide'oraisa. That's why he doesn't need to help out in that case. But if you say Tzar Ba'alei Chaim is midoraisa, I don't understand. Why would he not have to help out? Sure, it's Yei Nesech, but the animal is experiencing pain. Tzar Ba'alei Chaim is midoraisa, you would have to help out. So from the fact that we're saying if it is Yei Nesech, he does not need to help out, it must be Memele that Tzar Ba'alei Chaim is midorabanan, and the only reason why you would have to help out when it's not Yei Nesech is Mishum Eva. Hachi, to which the Gemara says no. Maybe you could say that Tzar Ba'alei Chaim is midoraisa. Okay, so if it's midoraisa, then why are you allowed to turn a blind? Why are you allowed to kind of go the other way when it's Yei Nesech? What about Tzar Ba'alei Chaim? Hachi ka'amar ulat ina yayin osir ein zakuk lo. No, by prika, to unload it, of course you would have to. Tzar Ba'alei Chaim is midoraisa. But to load up the animal with Yei Nesech, you would not have to do. Okay, fine. Toshma, come in here. Be'emas ovid kuchavim. Okay, an animal that is owned by an ovid kuchavim. Okay, and I think I could say now that the assumption is that if it's owned by an ovid kuchavim, so then the driver is also an ovid kuchavim. Umasoy Yisrael, and the burden belongs to a yid. V'chadalta, you don't need to help out. Right? The pasuk says, I'm reading the pasuk. Kisir chamor sanacha rovetz tachas masov v'chadalta me'azavlo azav tazav imo. Right? Meaning, the gist of the pasuk is, do not turn a blind eye, rather help him out. But, right, just like we learned by Ashavas Aveda, we said, V'salamta pam shata masalim, right, that there are times when you could hide, turn a blind eye. So here also, V'chadalta, there are times when you can, turn a blind eye. So you can go the other way. So we're saying that if it's a be'emas ovi kochavim, umasa'u Yisrael, V'chadalta, you don't need to help out. Now, v'yomar tzar bar lechaim de'oraisa, if you say tzar bar lechaim is mide'oraisa, amai v'chadalta, why do you not have to help out? Azov ta'azov mi barle, you should have to help unload it because of tzar bar lechaim. Now, this pasuk is the pasuk by Prika. This pasuk is the pasuk about unloading, right? So therefore, I don't understand. Who cares who owns the animal? If tzar bar lechaim is midoraisa, then you should have to help unload it because it's tzar bar lechaim. So now the Gemara gives an interesting answer. Le'olam tzar bar lechaim deoraisa. Really, you could say that tzar bar lechaim is deoraisa. So why are we saying v'chadalta? Why are we saying that you don't have to help? Hosum b'ti'ina, because we're talking about loading the animal. Now, it's weird because the pasuk is talking about unloading, to which the Gemara is going to ask about it later. But okay, for now the Gemara answers, well, it's talking about loading up the animal, that's why you don't have to help out. But tzar bar lechaim really is midoraisa. If that's the case, ema seifa. But it says, be'emas Yisrael, if the animal belongs to a yid, umasoi ovid kochavim, and the burden belongs to an ovid kochavim, azov, tazov, then you have to help him out. V'beti'ina, amayazov tazov. And if we're talking about loading the animal, then why do you have to help out? Mishum tzar di Yisrael. Well, because the owner of the animal and the driver of the animal is a yid, so you have to help him out. Yachi afilu reisha nami. Well, then why not also help out in the reisha because of the yid, right? In the reisha we said the burden belongs to the yid. Reisha b'chamer ovid kochavim seif b'chamer Yisrael. Well, the reisha where the animal is owned by an ovid kochavim, and the burden, the merchandise belongs to Yid, but the animal belongs to an ovid kochavim. The driver is also an ovid kochavim. Therefore, you do not need to help him load it up. But when the animal belongs to a Yid, the assumption is that the driver is oichid a Yid, and therefore help him load it up. My pasakta, how do you know? I don't understand. Why are you assuming that just because the animal belongs to an ovid kochavim, the driver is an ovid kochavim, and just because the animal belongs to a Yid, the driver is a Yid? Well, stama de milsa, inish basar chamrei azil, that a person that a person will go with his animal, will go with his donkey. I.e., I think the point is that I think what it's saying is that essentially the owner is going to be the driver. I think inish basar chamrei azil, the person goes after his donkey. At the very least, basically the point is that if the donkey is owned by an ovid kochavim, the driver is an ovid kochavim. I don't know necessarily saying if it's saying that the driver is going to be the ovid kochavim who owns it. I feel like that is what it's saying. But certainly what the assumption is that if the donkey is owned by an ovid kochavim, the driver is an ovid kochavim. If the donkey is owned by a yid, then the driver is a yid. But v'havi chadalta, v'azov ta'azov, v'prikahu d'chsive. But still, as I mentioned a minute ago, this is really weird because that pasuk of v'chadalta and azov ta'azov is talking about unloading. It's not talking about loading. It's the pasuk of unloading. And therefore, I don't understand how we could say that if the animal is owned by an ovid kochavim, then v'chadalta you would not have to help out. Right, that if the animal is owned by an ovid kochavim, right, so I don't understand why you would not have to help out if it's struggling. If tzar bar lechaim is midoraisa, of course you'd have to help out. So I don't understand. So Ella, so you could swap out Amalei for Ella. Hamani Rabbi Yosef Aglili. Oh, tzar bar lechaim lav doraisa. Well, you could say that this brisa, which says that if the animal is owned by an ovid kochavim and it's struggling, you don't need to help out. That's like Rabbi Yosef Aglili who says that tzar bar lechaim is only midirabon. Because after all, Rabbi Yosef Aglili says, right, that if the animal was loaded up with more than it can handle, you don't have any obligation. What about tzar bar lechaim? Rabbi Yosef Aglili says tzar bar lechaim is only midirabon. That's only midirabon. And that's why over here also he's saying that if the animal belongs to an ovid kochavim, also v'chadalta you don't have an obligation. What about tzar bar lechaim? It's midirabon according to Rabbi Yossi. This is Rabbi Yosef Aglili's opinion that it's midirabon. Toshma, come here. Oyev lifrok. If your friend his animal, his donkey is struggling and he needs help unloading it. But at the same time, right next to him is Visone Liton. You have somebody who's your enemy needs help loading up his animal. Mitzvah Besone K'dei Lochav V'Sitzro. So who do you help out? Do you help out the friend to unload or the enemy to load? The answer is you help out the enemy to load because it will force your Yetzer Hara, right? You obviously don't want to help your enemy. Right? Certainly if it's not between helping your enemy or helping your friend, right? You don't want to help your enemy, you want to help your friend. But in order to kind of overcome that Yetzer Hara and instead to help out your enemy, we say help out your enemy. But if Tzar Ba'alechaim is midoraisa, ha'adiflei. Well, look, if Tzar Ba'alechaim is midoraisa, then it's very nice that you want to, combat your Yetzer Hara. That's very, very sweet. But at the end of the day, if Tzar Ba'alechaim is midoraisa, shouldn't you have to help out your friend unload? Right? Because after all, his animal is in pain. Wow. Wow. You hear that? Even though you have this friend of yours whose animal is struggling, and Tzar Ba'alechaim is midoraisa, and you have mitzvah doraisa to, regardless of who owns the animal, you have to unload the animal. You have mitzvah doraisa. Still, don't unload the animal. Instead, help your enemy load up his animal, and put aside the mitzvah doraisa of Tzar Ba'alechaim. Help your enemy load up his animal, because to overcome your Yetzer Hara, to help out your enemy, is even greater than doing the mitzvah of preventing Tzar Ba'alechaim. Wow. Tashma Kamanir, Sone Sha'amru. Okay, when we talk about a Sone, your enemy, Sone Yisrael, we're talking about your enemy who's a Yid, Velo Sone Oved Kochavim, not your enemy who is an Oved Kochavim. So now there are two possibilities of which Sone we're talking about. So the pasuk of Prika, of unloading an animal, says, Kisira Chamer Sona'acha. If you see the donkey of your enemy, Rovetz Tachas Maso, is lying under its burden, V'chadatam Azov Lo, Azov Tazav Imo, you have to help him out. So we could be talking about the enemy in that pasuk, or we could be talking about the enemy in the price that we just quoted, that when your enemy needs help loading up his animal. Okay? So Tashma, coming here, Sone Sha'amru, when we talk about your enemy, Sone Yisrael, we're talking about a Sone, an enemy who's a Yid, V'lo Sone Oved Kochavim, not an enemy who is an Oved Kochavim. Not an enemy who's an Oved Kochavim. So now if we assume that we're talking about the pasuk, and the pasuk is talking about Prika, of unloading, and we're saying that when the pasuk talks about Kisira Chamer Sona'acha, we're talking about, so that pasuk is talking about an enemy who's a Yid. I don't understand. Mali Sone Yisrael, Mali Sone Oved Kochavim. But if we're talking about Tzar Ba'alechaim, who cares if the enemy is a Yid or not? You should have to help unload. So to which the Gemara says, Misavat Asone Dekrakoi, Asone Demasnisakoi. That no, when we're talking about an enemy over here, we're not talking about the enemy in the pasuk. No, in the pasuk, regardless of who it is, you have to help unload because of Tzar Ba'alechaim. When we say that if you have your friend who needs help unloading the animal, or your enemy who needs help loading the animal, help out your enemy, that's talking about an enemy who's a Yid, not an enemy who's an Oved Kochavim. Toshma, come in here. Rovetz v'lo rabtzin. So when it says that if you see your enemy's animal struggling, lying under its burden, velo ravtzin. If it's not a common occurrence, right? If it happens to be lying under its burden, velo ravtzin. Not if this happens all the time. Okay, then you don't have an obligation. Rovetz velo omed. If it's lying, but not if it's standing, right? Not if it's still on its feet. No, if it's lying under its burden, that's when you got to help out. Tachas maso velo miforak. And when it says beneath, it is right. The mitzvah prika is when it is beneath its load, but not if the load is already on the floor. Okay. Tachas maso she'acholamud bo, and when it says beneath its burden, it means a burden that it is able to handle. Right, its burden, a burden that it can handle, not if it was loaded up with more than it can handle. Now, Tzar Ba'alechaim deraisa. Now, if you say Tzar Ba'alechaim is deraisa, mali rovetz umali ravtzon. Umali omid. I don't understand. Who cares if it's lying down? Who cares if it does this all the time? Who cares if it's standing? If it's in pain, you have to help out. Well, how many Rabbi Yossi Aglili? The Amr Tzar B'Alechaim D'Rabban. Yeah, but this brisa is Rabbi Yossi Aglili, who says Tzar B'Alechaim is midrabanan. And how do we know that this brisa is Rabbi Yossi Aglili? Well, well, because the brisa talks about this concept of under its burden, a burden that it can handle. Milichatchila. Man shamaslei the islei aisvar. Who's the one who holds like this? Rabbi Yossi Aglili. That's Rabbi Yossi Aglili's opinion in the Mishnah. So Shema Minu. So you see that this is clearly Rabbi Yossi Aglili's brisa, and that's why you see that Tzar B'Alechaim is not really being taken into account over here. Can you really say that the brisa is talking about Rabbi Yossi Aglili? V'akatoni seifa, but it says tachas maso v'lo meforak. That only if it is under its burden, but not if it has fallen. My lo meforak. What does it mean that if it's not but if it's fallen, you don't have to help him load it up. If you say that if the burden is already on the floor, you don't have to help load it up. But what do you mean? The pasuk says you have to, right? Te'ina, you have to help him load it up. Imo elapshita lo meforak bichinam ele besocher. No, what it means is that if it is lying on the floor and you have to help him load it up, it means you don't need to help him load it up for free. You can even charge him. So man shamazle de islei aisvar, and whose opinion is that for te'ina you're entitled to get paid? Rabbanon. That's the rabbi's opinion, not Rabbi Yossi Aglili's opinion. So Rabbi Yossi Aglili v'tina savela k'Rabbanon. Well, Rabbi Yossi Aglili agrees with the rabbis that when it comes to loading up the animal, you are entitled to get paid. So you could say that the brisa is Rabbi Yossi Aglili, and Rabbi Yossi Aglili does not hold of Tzar B'Alechaim. And also, what about the fact that we say that they only chayev when it is when it is beneath its burden to unload it, but if the burden has already fallen to the floor, you do not need to help him load it, and that means you don't need to help him load it for free, but you can bill him, you can charge him for it. That is Rabbi Yossi Aglili as well. Rabbi Yossi Aglili agrees with the rabbis on that. Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Kisira, that when you see your friend's donkey, your enemy's donkey, struggling, so Yachol Afilu Meirachok, even if it's far away, you have to go all the way there. Tamloma Kisifga. It says in the context of Hashavas Aveda, Kisifga, when you encounter. So that's close by. Does a mamish mean like tifka, like mamish right there? Tamloma kisira, if you see it. So what is something that's kind of a combination of seeing it, so not like right in front of you, but also close enough? 1 7.5 of a mil. Right? Was that 1 7.5 or 1 second? 1 in 7.5 parts of a mil. Yeah, I think that's the same thing, right? Just take a mil, divide it into 7.5 parts, and one of those. All right. This is a ris. Tana umadada imo ad parsa, and then after you help it out, and I guess you get it back on its feet or whatever. I guess you then got to stick with it for like a parsa to make sure that everything's going to be cool. It's not going to fall down again. And you can receive money for, you can be paid for kind of walking with it for that distance. Okay, so if you see that it's struggling, so you unload it, and then when it's ready, I guess you load it back on, and then walk with it to make sure everything's okay. But you could bill, you could charge for that time. Wow, what a daf! That was packed. Oh my gosh, so much good stuff here. The biggest, most interesting thing I think was the whole sugya about Tzar B'Alechaim. Is it midoraisa, midorabanan? I think it sounds like it's midoraisa, right? Rabbi Yossi Aglili says midorabanan. I think the Rabbanan and Rabbi Shimon sounds like they say it's midoraisa. Very interesting stuff. Peace out.